Dominic, are you there?
Well, it looks like we are live streaming.
Okay, great. My name is Tracy Metzger. I'm chair of the IDA and the Governance Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order today. Our first piece of business is always to review the minutes that have been previously distributed of our last meeting, which I have. And unless there's any comments or concerns, I'd like a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Derek, a second. Bob? We got a second from Bob. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, our first order of business is to discuss the RFP that we contemplated putting out the second quarter of this year. It's for a real estate market analysis, and then obviously recommendations to the board. The last time we did this, I think our data is what, 5 years old, Sarah?
That's correct.
So, we felt it was definitely time, particularly given the momentum that we've had, in our downtown, just, I think, a record level of development, of course, and progress. But as I have to say, as I reviewed the RFP, for me, I find it premature. I mean, with the situation that we're in today, we have so many businesses that are closed. We do not know what the retail is going to look like for sure. That's a big question mark. And also on the office side, I think is going to be a bit different given the need for social distancing, in the workplace. So I'm not so sure this is the right time I don't think it's the right time to issue this RFP. I think we should wait, take another look in the third quarter, maybe in the fall at the earliest, but I'm certainly open to discussion on this.
I agree, Tracy. I think that it's going to be really important to be looking at those numbers later on in the year as things shake out.
Yeah, I actually concur. Yes.
Let me just share a different thought on this, though, guys. So
Yeah.
I agree that we may not want the analysis done sooner rather than later. But from a bidding perspective, getting the best price, this might be a very good time to get somebody to lock a price in.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I have no problem with moving this forward and approving it now, but I don't know. I think we got to be cautious about the timing of when they actually do the study.
Yeah, and maybe we can get the best of both worlds and do the selection in the time frame you're talking, but not necessarily pull the trigger on doing the work until end of summer, fall time frame.
So I think from the team's perspective here, we had committed to get you all something to review in the second quarter. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were doing that, as Tracy mentioned, because our data is 5 years old at this point. We know that we need sort of the roll up of what happened over the past 5 years as a foundation. Either way, I agree with Tracy completely that this is not the time that we're going to need that particular data. We are going to need that as we start to sort of market coming out of this, as well as respond to questions based on our operations. Where I think the staff was able to get comfortable with the idea of doing something currently was to be able to provide sort of third-party experts, industry experts who ostensibly would have their finger on the pulse of everything that was changing so dynamically and so drastically, that having that insight in the current term may be helpful in decision making in the interim. That being said, it will be sort of more valuable to be able to know what's going on coming out of this. The big question for me on releasing it now to lock pricing in, I don't know sitting today when the green light would be for when we're coming out of this. There's not a lot of certainty right now in terms of timing So I don't know if August, September, October may still be too early to determine what the market is planning to do going forward. So we might be in more of a holding pattern than it would typically be comfortable for a contract to sit and wait. I don't know anybody's thinking on that.
Well, a question I have, given Bob's desire to get the best deal, is perhaps we could kind of split this up a bit and say, you know, part one of the RFP is to take a look at the past, if you will, and give us a kind of a current state of affairs, you know, prior to COVID, basically. If it makes any sense for them to do that level of kind of research and thinking, that would provide us with at least those kind of benchmarks. But the forecasting side of it would need to be phase two, is a thought that I have.
This is Dominic. Can I weigh in for a minute?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. A couple things. One, I read the RFP. I thought maybe the turnover time might be a little short with people not being in offices. But the other thing is, I get a lot of stuff from things like Next City and urban planning and all that stuff. And there's a lot of. I actually thought the RFP timing. I mean, maybe it might be too soon, but I think it's a really good idea because I'm reading a lot of articles and already about what COVID and the shutdown's doing to urban areas and cities for housing, and the real estate market and housing. And if people are already starting to look at that the move into housing, into cities might be actually just going to start reversing now as people want to get away from density, as Gordon's talking about density. And so there's a lot of questions out there now how it's going to affect real estate in urban centers when we come out of the lockdown. So it might be a good idea. I'm thinking when I read it, I thought, well, gee, this timing might be just right, because if we're going to be planning for the future, we have to know what hopefully they'll be able to figure out some of the trends. And it might be like they said, it might be a little bit too soon right now to figure out the trends because it's so ongoing and so in the present time right now. But I think it's something that's probably going to need to be done, because it doesn't look like, from what I've been reading, it looks like things might be changing again for cities and development in cities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all agree that it needs to be done. The question is, what's the time frame?
Right.
And when you start talking about trends, in my opinion, it's too early to determine what that's going to look like.
I do just want to mention, if anyone does want to discuss particulars of the RFP, we should probably head into executive session so that we're not disclosing portions of that RFP in open session that could impact the appointment of an organization to assist us with this. So just note that as caution. If you think that you'd like to discuss the RFP in any detail, we should take a motion for that.
Thanks, Sarah.
So my thoughts aren't, this isn't specifically on the RFP. I'm kind of in agreement with everybody here on that, but I'm also wondering, as we start to come out of this, if we should start to look at maybe expanding on the retail grant side, or looking at other strategies to open up the businesses as they do change, because you're going to have a lot of, we're looking at the changes as work, because you're going to have to redo office spaces. You're going to have to invest in anybody that is able to keep their offices open. Obviously, you're going to go through these changes. So if we can maybe shift some of what we do to capture that or assist with that, that might put us in a position of bringing more business to us as the regular options kind of open back up. But I think the changes to the existing businesses to keep them open, that might be something we want to expand on if we can.
I think that we're taking a closer look at our grant programs today, and looking to see if we need to think about making some changes to do just that, Lee, to be able to help additional businesses and expand on the use of funds.
So it seems to me that we would have a motion on the table to, or what we should be, I think, working on or coming up with is a motion on the table to, in favor of the RFP, but holding back, when exactly the study's completed. Is that what we're talking about here?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I think we should revisit this in the third quarter.
Does that stop us from issuing the RFP right now?
Yes.
You mean recommending it to the board so that it wouldn't need to come back to governance at that point? Is that where you're getting to, Darius?
That and even putting out the RFP according to the schedule that's in here in the not too distant future, and getting the bids, and then either splitting it up into two phases, the past and then the future down the road in 3-6 months from now, or if we should just table the whole thing for right now.
Sarah, what are your thoughts on a phase 1 and a phase 2 of this with the same consultant, of course? But do you think that there's an advantage to that, or they just prefer to just put their heads down and get it done?
Yeah, I think the same consultant is critical because anyone who's forecasting is going to need to understand our market prior to COVID in depth. So to be able to have the benefit of having done that work prior to coming up with forecasting is going to be important. Again, the timing being uncertain, that's going to be interesting how we can sort of work that into the RFP to create enough flexibility on what that second phase looks like in terms of timing from a consultant's perspective. But it is something that we can go out with now. Again, our data is 5 years old. We're going to need it. We know we're going to need it. And, if we think we're going to go out with the forecasting piece within the next 6 months, call it, I don't believe that there's any harm in releasing the RFP understanding phase 1 now. That being said, in terms of the language in there about forecasting, in the next 6 months, if something happens that would change what we would want in that contract for the consultants, that would be the only thing that we would need to either look at amending based on procurement, issuing something different, or being able to work within the existing contract. So that's just something of note. If phase 2 is 6 months down the line and something significant occurs that would change what we wanted that scope to look like, we would be a little bit at risk for that.
Well, we could always revisit the scope of phase 2 if need be.
Yeah,
I think we'd be better off just tabling at this point. There are so many unknowns right now, and I think what Sarah described with the way that things are going to change and not being able to predict even the timeline for when this might be most useful to us, let alone some of the issues that we might be wanting to examine and test and study, are just too far off right now. I'd prefer to table it, and of course I won't be voting on this until it comes before the whole board, but I would love to see you guys consider tabling until the fall at least.
I would say one of the reasons why I see a value in getting at least the retrospective on this is the pushback that I think is going to come towards the IDA and towards how we essentially operate and the fundamental reason for us being here. And I think having that comprehensive data from the last 5 years, including a portion that we've been trying to work on in my office here a little bit, which is we have done our study on what the monetary effect of the pilots are to the municipalities prospectively, but we haven't actually done a retrospective one to actually put into hard numbers what we've actually been able to earn over what was expected based on what we've been doing here. So I do see a value, at least in that portion of it, that I would be prepared to move forward with.
And that again is, the basis that staff is comfortable moving forward at this point, because we do know that we need that data for some of the arguments that come up, some of the challenges that we get. Again, even in normal course of business, to be able to show, one particular talking point comes to mind where we've heard as a group and individually over and over again, the talking point that no one's living in these new apartments that we've created, and yet we know that there's a 97% or better occupancy rate in each of them. We know from speaking with the owners that they don't have vacancy in these buildings, but it's a rumor that's out there. And so being able to really point to, no, they were built prudently, and that the IDA was reacting to current market conditions and continues to operate responsibly. It is helpful to have that data behind us.
Okay. I think at this point, I'd like to have the committee consider, a motion to move forward with the RFP, but revising the scope for phase one, as we've discussed here, to look at what's happened and bring us kind of up to date from a market standpoint, through March, if you will, or through the end of 2019. And then there'll be a phase two scope expected to be issued within the next, 6 months.
That's great.
Tracy, would you consider pushing that out a little bit further than the next 6 months, maybe to the next year?
I just wondered if we would be
Bob,
able
you're on
to.
mute.
Yeah, we can always set that date with the contract person that's selected. I don't know that we need to get into that detail, but the idea is that we're going to do 2 phases, one now and one that we're going to schedule with them in the future.
Right. As long as that's not in the resolution. If we haven't limited ourselves to 6 months, if we put that in the resolution, then we are limited.
Well, I disagree that we'd be limiting ourselves. We'd be setting a thing that would have to get changed.
No, only if we put a 6-month deadline into the resolution, Bob.
I still don't think we'd be limiting ourselves. We'd be putting something in we'd have to change.
Oh,
But,
so we'd amend the resolution at a later date?
Yeah, but either way, I agree that what we're talking about is phases. The timing, I'm not so worried about.
Yeah.
I think the consultant is going, in order for the consultant to be able to respond, this is obviously a fee-based, proposal. We need to put some time frame around it. And to, again, we can make an amendment to that and understand that we'll have to go back to the consultant if in fact we change the timeline for phase two in any significant way.
We can always put language into the RFP to ask for feedback from the proposing firms in terms of what they believe the timeline should be for phase two and where they see their industry trends heading, to be able to understand better when we should be hitting go for this. We can take care of that in the RFP for sure.
And on an administrative level, the committee could delegate to the full board these timelines so that you don't have to meet as a committee again if you want to avoid a governance committee and if you want to just keep it at the board level. So that's another thought for you with respect to flexibility.
Thanks, Joe. Now, in the RFP, and I don't want to, I'm trying to prevent having to go into an executive session, but I think we have, May dates in there, Sarah? Andy?
I'm scrolling to it.
We do.
I think they need to be pushed out by 30 days, all those dates. They're very quick.
Yeah, they're all May, Tracy. Yep.
So if we can just move all of that out 30 days when we go to the full board.
Great.
So do I have a motion to move forward as we've been discussing?
Tracy, can I just suggest one thing? I agree with everything you just said there, but why don't we leave the issue date now so that it's just out on the street longer?
I think that's what you were talking through, Tracy.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
The due date, just change the due dates.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to give them some more time.
Yeah. So basically the questions and things like that, push those out, but get it out on the street sooner rather than later.
I think we were trying to back into keeping this in the second quarter timeline that we had talked through initially to be able to bring it back to the board for selection. But we're very happy to give them additional time. We'll get a better product.
So, sounds good. So do I have a motion, Bob? Well, I have one, Darius.
I'll move or second, whichever it is.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. All right, well, now we're gonna move into the project evaluation and assistance framework for student housing. Sarah, do you want to move into executive session on this?
Sure. I think in open session, we can introduce the topic and just sort of recall the rationale behind this study that the board and governance committee had taken on. We had been notified by the City of Albany's assessor's office of a change in the way that student housing projects would be assessed moving forward. The project evaluation and assistance matrix framework that had been in use by the board for the past several years created a definition of student housing based on the financial need of student housing projects according to the assessed value, the improved assessed value levels that were being seen coming out of the city at the time. Those incredibly high assessment levels called for actually at the time, incredibly low assessment levels called for less of a pilot than we would see in typical multifamily. With the assessment change, staff identified that there would be potentially a change in need of those projects. We conducted a staff assessment that proved that theory out, and the board authorized the issuance of a contract with a consultant to analyze those numbers to determine what our path forward on student housing should be. We received the results of those back. The sort of bottom line of the outcome of the analysis, which you see in the executive summary, is that staff's analysis did prove out, again, to be correct, that the changing dynamics has changed the need for those projects. And there is a suggested abatement schedule that has come back from the consultant as well. Talking through any of the details of the final analysis, we should move into executive session because we would be discussing the financial history of a particular corporation related to previous projects that were studied for that analysis.
So we can certainly move forward now without going into executive session. The information that was provided to us and posted to the website, which is basically kind of the executive summary of how WZHA came to their conclusions.
And the committee and board was provided the full update that included the financial analysis that was done for all of your review last week.
Right. So does anyone have any questions or comments relative to the outcome of the study? From my perspective, I wasn't surprised, as Sarah said, given the new assessment, we expected that schedule to change. And upon my review of the full data that our consultant provided and their methodology, I concur.
I may have missed this. Are we going to be expecting changes in the valuations to these two properties and or an application for different assistance going forward?
Their values have not changed as far as we know. We don't anticipate changes for that. This is simply to the matter in front of us today would be the governance committee recommending to the board to amend the project evaluation and assistance framework to remove the student housing definition as written and instead draft it to call for the schedule that's provided in the executive summary, which is the same schedule as the 80,000 and above, I believe, assessed value, improved assessed value pilot.
Right. So these are for projects moving forward. A new framework. Yes. Is everyone comfortable with the recommendations of the consultant?
I am, yeah.
Bob?
I'll move it.
Yeah.
Okay, Darius, we have a motion to move this to the full board. Do I have a second, Bob? Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, I think we have one more. Oh, we've got the advisory committee update, sustainability. Sarah?
Sure. I just wanted to provide a quick update that I had the opportunity to meet with the energy subcommittee of the city's sustainability advisory group and had a great discussion. Again, this was based on the letter that had been circulated to the board back in December that had come from that group requesting that we consider requiring projects to meet certain sustainability measures. And so the conversation was dynamic. It was great to hear from that group in terms of their priorities. What we did talk through is what has come around this board table a number of times is the idea of potentially adding a community commitment category related to sustainability that would provide an opportunity for projects or applicants to receive a point related to sustainability. That committee agreed to take a look at that and provide a recommendation on what the definition could be that the board could consider for a sustainability point. They were excited to sort of hear the process of the board, understand how the board operates, and they had talked through a number of other measures that they're looking at currently, including the stretch code that had just been published by NYSERDA in recent months in their analysis of that. So just an update at this point. They are going to come back to us with some thoughts on what would be helpful to sort of incentivize applicants to reach for through the evaluation and assistance framework and just an open, productive dialogue. So just a quick update there.
Thank you, Sarah. And did we have a COVID update as well? Just general?
This was, we were hopeful that we would have a more sort of robust section here related to COVID-19 updates. We are still anticipating that industrial development agencies may be able to put their funding to good use. We do not have any further guidance or clarification on that to date, but staff is at the ready. Lee, exactly as you had talked through, looking at programs that could help businesses adapt to the new environment, programs that would help businesses sort of be resilient and come out of this again to strengthen our commercial corridors as well as to create new construction and new business moving forward. So we are working through potential guidelines for that. Again, we sort of have to wait until guidance comes out directly, but we stand at the ready and have heard from most of you as well your desire to be able to assist as we're allowed, and we are at the starting line and ready for go as soon as it comes.
Sarah, do you expect us to get a go from the governor?
I have stopped speculating on that for sure. I think we have resources that we're able to deploy as long as we're deploying them prudently. We're ready to do that as necessary. We're also looking at outside of the Industrial Development Agency resources that are on the table currently or could be on the table in the near future to be able to help with programming going forward with or without IDA. Allowance to be included in that program. There are a number of other programs out there that we have been getting out to the community. We have been active in working on the reopening plans for the region as well. So there's a lot of regulation that's out there that we're able to help and be assisting with, as well as information. The financial assistance is absolutely necessary, and so we're gearing up for that as much as we can.
Thank you. Do we have anything else on the agenda today?
In terms of other business, some of you may not know at this point that Jaqueen Hoke has provided his letter of resignation from the board. It's my understanding it's based on a career trajectory change and projects that he'll have ongoing going forward. He is a big loss to the group. I know Tracy shares that sentiment. But for the governance committee in particular, again, the Common Council is the group that does select new Industrial Development Agency board members. We will be notifying them of this change, where the governance committee and the IDA is sort of required to assist, is putting together the criteria that you all feel make a good Industrial Development Agency board member, as well as the skill set and background that you believe would be missing from the group based on the new vacancy to be able to help guide the Common Council's decision. We've always been welcome to sort of participate and hear from the applicants as they come in. We expect that will continue as it had previously, but again, it is up to the Common Council. The other point here is if you know of someone that would make an excellent IDA board member, that solicitation we would expect to go out shortly after notification of the Common Council. So if someone really wants to dive in and you think that they'd be a great fit, be ready for that. I guess maybe not coffee, but coffee over Zoom to talk through how great it is to be on the IDA board.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you. As the board is here. So I was thinking we were going to talk about this at the board meeting, but I'm certainly glad that you brought that up. I did have a long conversation with Joaquin, and as Sarah said, he'll be missed. He's just kind of getting his stride going here. So disappointing, but I completely understand where he's coming from, and the positive piece of this is that he is hopeful and plans to go forward with some developments, in the city, and obviously was concerned about conflicts which would certainly arise. So he's not leaving the city. He's just needing to make a move off of our board. So thank you, Sarah. So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Darius, a second. Bob? All those in favor? Aye. Thanks to
Aye.
you all. I'll see some of you tomorrow.
Thank you.